Hello, everyone. My name is Quinn Rydell, and today I'm going to be discussing behaviorism and specifically development theory. So, I've made a concept map to help us understand that. So, we're going to start right here. Development theory was studied by, and we can go to Vygotsky first. And Vygotsky worked mainly with sociocultural theory, which is a development theory that focuses on the social aspects of learning. So, for example, group work, a lot of more peer based things, and just general day to day social interactions that doesn't even really have to be in a classroom setting. So, sociocultural theory has one sort of prerequisite, I would say, and that is a collective monologue. And what collective monologue is it is when children talk but don't really say anything or express any. They're not trying to communicate. They're just sort of doing it for themselves, and that has to be sort of outgrown. They have to be over that before you can kind of see the effects or what socio-cultural learning theory studies, because they have to be able to communicate naturally with each other and express their ideas and challenge each other's ideas to be able to learn in a socio-cultural context. So, a couple uses that come with socio-cultural theory. They're both cultural tools. So there's co-constructed processes, and that is multiple people having conversations to talk through a problem. So very standard. Any sort of group work, any sort of team meeting, anything really with multiple people addressing some sort of situation and how to address it. And then there's also one of the big takeaways of a sociocultural learning theory is the zone of proximal development. And the zone of proximal development is about it's a very subjective stage. It depends on what you're talking about, but it's the stage in a student's learning journey where they can master a concept with help. So you wouldn't teach a kindergartner calculus, but you might teach a high schooler calculus if they can handle it and if they have a teacher who is teaching that class. Um, that just about covers Vygotsky and sociocultural theory. So we're going to head back up the web to studied by, and we're going to go over to Piaget. Piaget, first and foremost, had the basic tendencies of thinking he came up with, and this is a lot about how our brain interprets the world around us, how it, what it does with all the sensory information that it gets in. So Piaget found that brains use patterns a lot. They use, everything is put into some sort of pattern and or organized, group. It's all sorted, and it's sorted into things called schemas. Schemas, groups of information, behaviors, anything derived from your own experience or stimuli. Um, the other big aspect of thinking is adaptation. And adaptation is broken up into assimilation and accommodation. Assimilation is when you take in new information and you assimilate it into your already pre-existing schemas. So it exists within the context of what you already know and the schemas that you've already established. And then accommodation is where you actually change your pre-existing schemas to accommodate new information. So that usually happens when you're proven wrong about something, or a way that you've been thinking about something is challenged to a degree where you doubt it. And both of these processes compete against each other simultaneously in something that we call equilibration. And equilibration is really important for learning. It is the balance between the two, like I said earlier. Excuse me. And it's based on the continuous evaluation. So a lot of self-reflection. Formative assessment might fit into there. It might be something that aids equilibration. And when equilibration is not achieved, we have disequilibrium, which is the disruption of that balance when someone realizes what they were doing is not working. So you want to have, as a teacher, you want to find just the right amount to where they're being challenged and their ways of thinking are being evaluated, but they're not just being, proven wrong over and over again until it crushes their self-esteem. So that covers Piaget's basic tendencies of thinking. And now we're going to go to Piaget's cognitive development theory, which is theory that's more concerned with the biological development of the brain and how it progresses and what we're actually able to think about, or ways we're able to think as we get older. Because Piaget found that students weren't able to, or younger students weren't able to think about things like hypotheticals, or really young students would get the past and the present confused. So he started thinking about how the brain develops different modes of thinking, you could call them. So after a lot of research, Piaget came up with 4 stages of cognitive development. The first stage, the sensory motor stage, which takes place in infancy, and not a lot happens. You slowly develop object permanence, which is understanding that objects perceive or exist outside of what you can perceive. So, for example, that's why peekaboo is really funny to a lot of young kids, because when you put your hands in front of your face, you don't exist to them anymore because you have object permanence, or because they don't have object permanence. Another big development in that stage is that action becomes deliberate. They act based on learned behaviors. They start acting not just on whatever reflex they're feeling at the moment. They act on learned behaviors like, liking a toy or disliking a sound that, made them cry one time. Next, we have the pre-operational stage, which is early childhood, around from the time the child starts talking to the time they turn 7. Big development in this stage, egocentrism. So they can kind of think of themselves as a separate entity. They start to develop some sense of identity, but they can't understand that there are other identities out there. They think their way and what they perceive is the one supreme experience. They can't understand other people's points of view, maybe why something else would make them mad if they wanted to do it. They also start to develop conservatism. Don't know why I struggled with that. And that is understanding that an object can retain qualities or remain the same even if it's moved, even if it's split in two. They basically understand that even if an object changes form, it can still be the same object and hold some of the qualities that it held previously. So after the pre-operational stage, they move on to the concrete operational stage, which takes place around late elementary school to middle school. They start to develop seriation, which is arranging objects based on traits. So if you asked a child in the concrete operational stage to arrange, an array of objects from heaviest to lightest, they would be able to do that. Classification, sort of like seriation, just it would be group all of the red things together instead of heaviest to lightest. There's also reversibility, which is where they can observe a series of steps, then mentally go back step by step and see the entire process backwards. So kids who haven't reached the concrete operational stage will have trouble recalling previous steps, breaking down steps, things like that. And finally, we have the formal operational stage. This is high school to college age. Major developments, they're able to consider multiple perspectives now. They're also able to better understand hypothetical situations or situations they have not themselves experienced, and they're able to use deductive reasoning or inductive reasoning to propose solutions to things they may not have experienced. So, why are we talking about this? How can teachers use this? Well, let's go up to the top right section, which is teachers can use both men's work in the following ways. So, conclusions from Vygotsky. Vygotsky summarized most of his learning with 3 sort of subsets of learning that he found to be effective, or that his theory supported. So there's imitative learning, which is learning by watching, kind of monkey see, monkey do. There is instructed learning, which is taking the information from teachers. It's very similar to assimilation, where you assimilate it into your own existing knowledge. Assimilation or accommodation, I guess, depending on what the information is. So that kind of connects with Piaget's work. And then there's collaborative learning, which is what we talked about with his sociocultural theory. A lot of group work, peer to peer, not teacher to peer. And conclusions from Piaget. He concluded that you have to make work just right level of difficulty. So that means you have to be very aware of what stage of cognitive development your students are at, and ensure that it's not work that they're just physically not able to do to think about. He also concluded that the main goal of education is helping children learn how to learn. So we know, their brains are going to develop. Piaget has his stages, everyone goes through them at the same time. So a teacher's goal should be to teach them how to learn new things, how to learn new skills, not just how to reactionarily, add a problem that looks a certain way using these steps or this formula. He also concluded that learning is an individual constructive process. So, big takeaways from that. Everyone learns in different ways, and everyone learns based on what they learn, based on what they've already learned. So, they have their pre existing schemas, and you need to build on them, not just give them information that may or may not fit in with the existing schemas they hold, because that won't get you anywhere. So I hope you enjoyed my concept web about cognitive development theory. Have a great day.